Hello, everybody. Everybody joins the webinar. I just opened everything up. Welcome to the Sennheiser Roundtable on mixing monitors. We'll just give a little time for everybody to jump on here, and then we'll get started. Hope everybody's doing well and safe and sound out there. Excellent. Well, hello, everybody out there. Welcome to the Sennheiser webinar on mixing monitors. And I hope this will be a fun and informative webinar for everybody. Hope everybody's doing great out there. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. So this should be fun. I'm Dave Missall. I'm with Sennheiser. And we also have Tim Moore and Greg Simon with Sennheiser. We'll be monitoring questions and chats during the session. So feel free to put in a chat or a question down below as part of the meeting, and we'll see what we can shuffle over to our panel here. And we'll just monitor that throughout the hour and a half that we have here. I'd like to introduce everybody. So give me a sec here and get my notes. I'd like to introduce Matt Napier, who 25 years of experience with working with bands like Madonna and Roger Waters, Michael Bublé, and has been doing it for a long time. So a wealth of experience. Karrie Keyes, been working with Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder for many years. Thanks for being here, Karrie. Really appreciate it. Also, Red Hot Chili Peppers as well. And then Seamus Fenton, again, many years experience recently with the Hugh Jackman tour. And my daughter actually went and saw that. She
Really?
loved it. Yeah, in Boston. She loved it. She loves them. But also Pet Shop Boys for many years as well. Welcome. And Becky Pell, who got up very early for us. Thank you so much down in Australia. She's worked with Anastasia and Westlife, Bill Wyman, Kyle Minogue, James Brown, Jennifer Lopez. Again, just a wealth of experience. And then, of course, last but of course not least, John Lewis, monitor mixing for Pink, AC/DC, Cher. Again, 25 years experience, also with Eric Clapton, Paul McCartney. Everybody just a wealth of experience here on this chat. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time to come together here and talk about monitor mixing. I'm going to start with a couple of questions. Again, people, if you have questions, just go ahead and start putting them in. But I'll start, and I just want to have you all just a couple of minutes about yourself and how you got into live sound, and in particular, what steered you, into mixing monitors, and that you've been doing for a while now. I'd love to hear the experience. And why don't we start with Karrie, and just learn about everybody a little bit.
All right. I started by loading trucks and learning how to wind a mic cable. I was 17, had no experience, didn't know that there was such a thing. So being 17, I didn't have any other obligations, so I could make a lot of sacrifices and work for cheap and work for free and just hang out and learn everything. And eventually I was able to quit my day job. And then, I worked alongside Dave Ratt. And at that point in time, Ratt had two sound systems. One fit in a 16-foot bob truck and the other one fit in a van. And everybody did what they needed to do to operate a small company. So there was a lot of sacrifices made. There was only two systems, so there was only two crews. And I was able to work every show that Dave booked with his system. And we just grew from there. So a lot of the shows we didn't have an on-stage monitor mix. Those were the high dollar shows. And when we did, sometimes we would hire in another person to do monitors, and then I just learned. I would mix the support bands and I'd learn from them. And then one day on the way to the gig, was told that I was going to mix the headliner. And then by the time that most people leave monitors, it was too late. That was just my world.
Excellent.
So that's how I started.
Yeah, a lot to learn on the job, and then they realize your worth and they hand it to you. Well, here you go, you're ready.
Yeah.
John?
Well, I was always destined to do monitors, really. So I sort of grew up in the business because my dad's a monitor engineer as well. So I was always going to gigs with him when he used to work for like Clash and Dire Straits and things like that. So that's where my sort of grounding was. And then I went to study at university. I studied sound technology at LIPA in Liverpool, which is a performing arts centre that Paul McCartney set up. I studied there, then moved to London, worked at the Millennium Dome with Matt Napier. That's where we first met. And then started working for PA companies. And because of my history with monitors, I was always put onto monitors. And that's where I sort of cut my teeth. And I've never really wanted to move from that end, because I love the interaction and the sort of person-to-person contact that you have during the show and,
with the artist,
and the build-up to the show. So that's where I've always wanted to be, and that's where I've always stayed.
Excellent. Becky?
I went to my first gig age 12 and stood behind the front of house guy, and it suddenly dawned on me there was a whole industry going on here. So that was from that point on, much to my teacher's horror, was the only thing I wanted to do. So didn't have a clue how to get into it, and I went to School of Audio Engineering in London and then the School of Sound Recording in Manchester to try and just learn the ropes a little bit, and wrote to everyone I could find contacts for, and eventually got offered an opening at R.G. Jones in London, PA company in London, who were looking for a kid basically. So I moved my life from Manchester to London down there in the space of a couple of days, and stayed there for 5 years and was taken under the wing of Bruce Springsteen's monitor engineer, who was working there at the time. And he basically taught me how to do monitors. And I discovered that I really enjoyed, like John said, that interaction and that vibe of being down that end of things. Then went freelance after that. And in a very nice full circle, ended up mixing monitors for the band that sparked it all when I was 12. Mixed monitors for them for about 5 years.
Oh, wow. Came all the way around. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Seamus?
Well, I mean, I started playing a band in the southeast of England. And I was completely curious the whole time about how it should be done properly, basically. Pubs and clubs in the southeast for a few years. And it was total curiosity. I just wanted to know how it was done properly. I wanted to know the anatomy of a gig and how the whole day unfolds for everybody and who does what and when and why and how. And I'm still fascinated by that whole process of the day of a gig, even now. But I was always, curious about what I was listening to when I was up on the stage. I was like, well, so how's this done properly? What do you listen to? How do people listen to stuff in big gigs, And so I hustled a few people and managed to get into a little company in West London called the PA Company, and started working for them for a little bit. And they weren't really touring. I was in the warehouse for a lot. Lots of dry hires, lots of putting disco rigs in the back of minivans, and they did a lot of BBC stuff. So there was bits of TV and there was bits of radio to do as well. And then I met a guy called Mike Downs, and he just landed an artist called Paul Weller, and so I went out with him basically, and I looked after him for a couple of years until he didn't want to do it anymore. And he said, "All this will be yours one day, my son. Tomorrow, to be precise." And and that's kind of it. And then I was with Paul Weller for quite a long time, and it was a tricky little gig because it was loud, and so I got into lots of little tricks and things, and yeah, and that was basically how I started. But it was just total curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially for being a musician too, right? Trying to understand, how it can be better. Being up there
Yeah.
on
Well, I
stage.
was just fascinated by, how does this happen in a big room?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was totally, like I said, it was total curiosity that got me into it.
What did you play, Seamus?
Bass.
Ah,
4 strings, you see, John.
nice and easy.
Explains it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Seamus. Matt, how about you?
I was failing a geology degree pretty miserably at Oxford Polytechnic, and realised I was never going to be a geologist. So I got a job in a local nightclub in the coat check room, and I met the guys who ran the sound system there. And basically, one of them was the keyboard player in a local band called Ride, and he was going off on tour, so he kind of threw me into the monitor position, and it was a old Soundcraft 400B desk with some beat up wedges. And he kind of showed me around that, and I was left to run the monitors on stage in that club for a while. And we used to rent, when we had a posh gig in where we needed a posh effects unit or something, we'd rent it off the local PA company, Tiger Hire. So I started working for them, and Tiger Hire had quite a good pedigree. The guy who owns it, Jim Parsons, is pretty clever. He knows what he's doing. But Tree Tordoff used to work for him as his main guy, who then went on to work for Yamaha. John Burton was the main sound engineer there, and Richard Young, when he was still a sound engineer before he became a production manager, he was there as well. So there were basically, Tree, John, myself, and Richard, who were in the warehouse doing the gigs, and I was the youngest guy. So obviously, on the rubbish college balls and stuff, I get sent out to do monitors on it. So I did that for a few years, and then applied for a job at the Millennium Dome, which is where I met John. Did that for a whole year and a half. And when that finished, a guy called Ray Furs, who's a front of house guy, he basically started giving me gigs on his acts as the monitor guy. So because of that, I stayed in monitors really, and was quite happy staying there. So yeah, I did quite a few tours with Ray, and that led into other stuff, but started out in the clubs.
Cool. That's amazing. It's a lot of it is where you are, right time, right place. And
It's absolutely meeting the right people at the right point. I mean,
Yeah.
me working with people like John Burton and Richard Young early on in my career was fantastic.
Yeah.
Because they've gone on and done fantastically well.
And saying yes, right? When they say, go do this, and saying
Always
yes,
saying yes.
I can do it.
Always
Okay.
saying yes.
Yes,
Every
sir.
gig.
Yeah.
I used to have a policy of saying yes even before I discussed money or what the show was or the times. And I did some horrible gigs because I'm sure we all have, but in the early days,
Right.
it was just the phone would ring and they'd be like, "Are you available?" And if I was, it'd be yes.
Right. The averages are with you if you continue to say yes. That's for sure.
Yeah, and saying yes when you not necessarily know that you can actually do it to the best.
As long as you know you can get away with it.
As long as you get away with it, yeah.
That's the key, isn't it? And so I've done gigs before where people have rung up and said, I remember when the O3B, the Yamaha desk first came out, and someone rang me up, and it was Chris Fitch at Scan, and he was like, "Do you know how to use the desk?" And I went, "Absolutely." And I did a gig in Birmingham, and on the train on the way up, I was reading the manual, looking, I don't know how this works.
Yeah. It's okay to be a little nervous, right? Put a little pressure on yourself. That's okay.
As long as you know you can achieve it, I think it's okay to blag it a bit.
I took a gig as a RF tech on a tour, big arena tour, never done it before, and the scanner turned up the day before I left. So I'm just there on the plane, reading, trying to know what the hell I was up to.
And that's a question I'll ask later too, and on the wireless side of things, which is going to be such a big part, not only just the mixing, but just the manipulation and the wrangling of the wireless side of it. What I wanted to start with was you've all experienced the transition, especially on the big acts, from going from speaker monitors on stage to more use of the in-ear monitors and the wireless monitors on stage. Obviously, the floor monitors are still very popular, and not everybody can afford in-ears, right? Great thing to have, but not everybody can afford it. But what are some of the differences in thinking about the mix when you look at monitor mixers as opposed to an in-ear monitor for the artists? And I guess I can go to Karrie again. And then anybody else as well, feel free to join in later.
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this because my guys never really went to ears.
Right, because there's still, right, even at the higher level, there's still people that say, I don't want to use the in-ears.
My singer doesn't. He used them for about 10 years, one ear. and the whole time we were hoping that maybe he would someday put the second ear in. And he went the opposite way of getting rid of the one ear and going back to all wedges.
I think that's one of the hardest things, isn't it? Is when you've got an artist who will only use one because they don't feel confident at that first day. It's a nightmare to try and get them to go one way or the other.
Yeah. So I've never really had the luxury of just transitioning and going to all in-ears. So my head's always been wedges, ears, blending it. You know, and
depending on the artist, it's still a hard sell sometimes for the in-ears.
Yeah, and even my guys that are using, I only have 2 that use, or now I have 3 that use both ears, but none of those are stereo. That, you know, they're not relying on them for stereo mixes. They're very basic. They're being essentially used for earplugs. So yeah. I just haven't had that luxury of being able to get rid of all wedges and focus on mixing. You know, it's always, I don't know, triage kind of.
So there's actually a very relevant question here in the chat that somebody asked, how do you approach a wedge-only gig with a very loud band?
I mean,
don't get him to turn down.
Tell them to turn it down.
With AC/DC, it's a mixture of the both, and you know, Brian always sung with one ear in, one ear out, so it's always tricky to do that. But the stage level is so loud on that; it's more about creating pockets where everybody can sit and sort of operate. And I think when you've got, especially when you've got a very loud backline, it's the only way that you can really operate in that respect. It's a wedge only, really loud thing. It's almost like little safe areas that people can go to.
Yeah.
They can recover before they have to run across the stage and carry on their craft.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount on how loud the vocalist is as well, isn't it? I mean, if you've got a strong vocalist with a loud band, you can make it work. The problem is when you get a loud band and a whisper quiet vocalist.
Yeah,
that's
and it's a lot then of prioritizing what are the key aspects of it, whether it's, you know, drums for timing or guitars for pitching or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think also you start learning. I certainly in the Weller world, there was a lot of little tricks that I had to do to keep level up without hacking it to bits. Do you know what I mean? Little bits of phase, little bits of timing here, and like John says, pockets, comfortable pockets is the way forward.
It's safe zones, yeah.
Yeah,
I think I'd say John hit the nail on the head, but it depends on the individual musicians, because you might have a band where 3 of the members want it definitely loud, and you might have a couple who want it a bit quieter. And I certainly know when I did Primal Scream, we used to put Kevin Shields all the way down one end of the stage because he was so loud you couldn't have him anywhere. You know, he had to be by himself almost. But I think John hit the nail on the head of creating that zone where you can have it really loud in some areas for some people and maybe a little bit quieter for the vocalists so they can hear themselves.
And I think one thing that people always fall into, which is the wrong way to go, is that people start trying to use compression to create those things, but all you ever do is it's counterproductive, because you know you start getting into creating as instruments drop in dynamic range and it opens up to the stage. You're opening yourself to huge feedback issues. But I think it's always the go-to that people seem to go that way first of all when they're trying to deal with the loud stage. But it's the complete opposite of what you should do.
Yeah,
and also speaker cab placement. I mean, getting guitar cabs pointing at their ears rather than at the back of their knees. That sort of thing can help. If the guitar players want the guitar loud for the tone, it's make sure they're actually listening to it and it's not just firing into the the lower leg. That's not going to help. Maybe you angle guitars at their ears, it can help.
Yeah.
And I always used to, with a pair of wedges, I always used to kick them. I never had them parallel, so you'd always have a little bit of. So there was always one that was slightly off, so you didn't have some hideous high-end hotspot. That would catch a bit of feedback or a chin or all of that sort of stuff. A hat,
we all have a hat.
Glasses.
You EQ it within an inch of its life, and then they walk out for the show wearing a hat, and you're like, no!
What we did a couple years ago, probably about 5 years ago now, and this is only something really you can do when you have the luxury of working for a band for as long as I have, or it's not possible on a one-off situation. But we've always battled volume, and they just got to the point, they're older in their career, and they're just like, cannot take this volume anymore. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, really?
You said that for years.
Yeah, I've been and you can't get them to turn down because that's the tone of the rig, and we'll destroy the tone of the rig. And if we point it over here, they can't hear it, they can't feel it, and I'm getting blasted. So we sat down and realistically took all those parameters of can't turn down, can't angle the rigs, can't open up the stage anymore. What are we going to do? So, and it goes back to creating those safe spaces, those pockets that people can get into. So we got a bunch of baffles and we started using them on stage. The first thing that happened was it took all that high-end mash that hits the center of the stage when you have just wedges. So that gave Ed a really comfortable space to be, because now he was as loud as he wanted. His mic wasn't picking up everything else on stage. And, last tour, one of my guitar players, he took his baffles and he finally put them in front of his rig. And he's like, I'm just going to baffle myself now. And I'm like, great. But they were on the side of him, and we put them down, between drum riser on each side, between my bass player and my guitar player. We baffled. The loudest thing on our stage is our singer's guitar rig. And that's right in the center of the stage. We put baffles all the way around that rig. And it stopped it from bleeding into bass rig world. It stopped it from going underneath the drum riser. The drum monitor was able to get turned down because now things weren't fighting with each other anymore.
I think
Creating these little pockets.
Yeah.
And also, I think you've got to be quite judicious with how you use your EQ. It's quite easy to start hacking into the EQ too much, where you're taking it out on the graphic for the wedges, and then you're hacking into the desk channel, and you just create phase incoherence. You've really got to pick the frequencies out of the problem, focus on them, and try and not pull everything out of the mix. I think too often you see inexperienced engineers, and they start hacking away across all the frequencies, and you're not adding any volume to it there. You're actually making it quieter. So
exactly,
sometimes it's worth going. I mean, we've all done it when you get to the stage of it, particularly with analog or even with wedges, where you just go, you're going to just flatten everything off and re-EQ it, because you can dig yourself a hole. So you need to be careful.
That was a good day, that.
Yeah.
So you got, oh my God, it's so
that morning when
so
you go,
much
right, I know
better.
what I'm going to do today. I'm going to throw away 7 months of touring and start again.
Yeah.
But that was the thing as well. I remember when we suddenly all got digital desks, Mark, where you suddenly had a toolkit of all that, you could never have all those compressors and all those EQs and all those little notches and all those digital EQ, because people would just laugh at you if you put that on a list of analog. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, hang on, I could put some EQ on that bit, and I could put some EQ, and I could just notch this tiny little bit there. And it's audio toolkits in the digital domain now are vast, whereas before you had to fill very heavy racks and then keep it all working.
And then now with in-ears, I mean, what's the new problems then with in-ears and mixing? So you have more control, but is it better? Is it there's other issues you got to deal with?
I think it's got to the stage now between the in-ear transmitters and some of the in-ear molds you can get. Now it's really good, but there was a period, I think, in the middle where it was difficult, that transition period where in-ears gave you the isolation, but the quality wasn't there. So that's where the musicians were struggling between they like the visceral feel of the wedges, but they like the separation of the in-ears and the control. And I think it's only really the last few years where the tech's got there, where you can have a really solid sounding mix in the in-ears, and it actually sounds quite weighty, which is it's only recently really had the drivers.
It wasn't sounding real to them, and they needed
it wasn't. And the early in-ears were not really, the sound stage wasn't there, and the weight wasn't there. So you were still putting wedges in for the weight, but then that was causing coloration in the mics. And that was the problem, which is why a lot of musicians would put them in and go, oh, I don't like it, I'll use one, I'll maybe use, switch between them. I think but the last few years, the tech's got there where you can make it sound quite quite good in the ears without needing the wedges. But it's only recently we've got there, I think.
And it was that weird time where the PA systems were pushing all low end off stage, and you were ended up being in such a sort of low end hall. The in-ears were sounding tinny, that nothing was sounded weighty. So then you were introducing subs, which was on stage, which was introducing all other problems.
Oh, well,
so,
yeah, right.
But the weight aspect of armature drivers now is massive.
And also, line arrays and system text and the way systems are set up now have helped enormously as well. You don't seem to have. There always used to be a kind of line of mud down the middle of the room as the subs kind of coupled and messed about with stuff. Yeah. And that doesn't really happen anymore, does it? Do you think so? I mean,
no. If anything, I'm struggling for low end in the centre.
I mean, it's incredible how much
technology behind the changed a lot. It's amazing what they're able to do now in control of the speaker.
It's become much more of a relationship between the monitor engineer and the PA system tech in front of house too, because you can now have the ability to control to some extent how much you're getting back from the PA.
Yeah.
And when you do the full hard avoid thing, certainly the band I'm working with and have been working with for a long time, Westlife, don't like that. They like most musicians, they want some feel on stage. Yeah. And my guys actually have in-ears and wedges because they do still like a bit of some more direct feel on stage than they get back from the room. And even with the advances in ears, they actually like the kind of the physical, visceral feel to it. So
Becky, are they using that then as, so they got the in-ears on and they're just using it almost as an ambience feed? Or you're still doing a pretty good mix through that also? Or are you
Disco
keeping those
vibes.
two separate? Right? So more of just the feel of it. So you're not really doing a discrete mix through that, or not, or you are?
I am, because some of them wear both. One of my guys, they've been going for 20 years, and the in-ear technology and 20 years ago was very much in its infancy. And so they got into that habit of wearing one, and sometimes he'll go to two, but then it's just the comfort factor. He likes the actual physical feel of one ear being exposed. So depending where he is on stage, it becomes a more defined mix for him.
Okay. Greg, do you have I know we've been talking for a bit. Do you have any another question that
Yeah, we've actually got quite a few questions coming in. So a good one here is, have you guys, and I know the answer to this is yes, but maybe elaborate a little bit, have you guys dealt with bad attitudes from artists or musicians, and how do you handle it?
Never.
No, it doesn't happen.
Very politically is how you handle it.
Yeah.
Do you always say yes?
No, it depends on the band. I mean, I think artists, when they're on stage, they're in front of a crowd, they're going to get tetchy sometimes because the pressure on that is on them to perform. And when something goes wrong with the technology, or even in their own head, they feel there's something wrong. As the monitor guy, you're quite often one of the first people they turn to, and it's an outpouring of emotion, and you can't let it get to you. As a monitor engineer, one of the biggest skills you need is a thick skin. You've got to be able to take that abuse. And 99% of the time when the show's over, it's all forgotten. And the next day it'll be fine. Or, you might have a problem that carries on for a few days, but because it's just an emotional tension on stage, I don't think you can read too much into it, as long as you've done your job correctly. And I think we've all been in situations where we've all had an artist shouting at us for whatever reason. It's probably not our fault, but we're just
very much
in line of fire. And part of your job is to make them feel comfortable on stage. So you have to kind of roll with it and judge the mood and take it that day. If there's a serious problem, you can sit down with them afterwards and talk to them about the problem and fix it. But part of being a monitor engineer is getting kicked sometimes. That's just the nature of the gig. I'm sure we've all been there.
Yeah, very much so. We've all spent half a song wondering, what's wrong, what's going on, and then at the end of it, realizing that the follow spots are pointing into their eyes.
Absolutely. Yeah, or somebody yawned in the front row.
And that is your fault.
I had an artist I was working with, and he always used to look over and look quite angry at me, and it was like, And then because of the nature of the show we did, we actually changed the monitor desk to the other side of the stage. And I realized it wasn't me. He just used to look to that direction, pull an angry face. And it was just one of the things he did. But I was convinced for months he was staring at me and giving me this really dirty look. And it wasn't. It was just part of his stage persona. It was kind of...
And that's a good question too then. And so how do you establish that communication during the show? You know, what do you talk to them first? You know, is it all hand signals? You know, is there certain points when they come off the stage? How do you work that out with them so that there is something wrong? They know how to communicate with you properly. Do you set a plan for that?
I think it's something you build up with an artist as you work with them. You know, different artists. I mean, sometimes you communicate through their guitar text, doing a guitar change. Other times they'll speak directly to you, or it'll be hand signals. I mean, I've had artists just say into the mic, you know, turn me up. They're not afraid to say that, and then other artists will be very subtle, and they're kind of giving you subtle little hand signals, and you're trying to work out what it means. Yeah. So it's and as you work with an artist, the more you work with them, you work out their little idiosyncrasies. So you work out what that particular person.
I mean, you can get down to a point that you can hear like an inflection in the way they're singing, and you know what that means, or you know what you need to do to bring them back onto pitch, or to bring them you know, back on timing and things. And it's tiny little inflections, or the way that their facial expressions are, that you can you build that rapport. It's a relationship.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's one of the nice things over time that's so great, because you think, look, I know what's going on here. You know, you just get completely in tune with the whole vibe.
Even in their performance, you start to hear a difference where you know you have to make some sort of change.
Yeah.
But the visual thing is crucial. I mean, I've always found it really hard to mix monitors when you're backstage on a screen. I mean, you can do it, but it's the little tiny things you spot with a person that you realise they're not happy.
Oh, as opposed to seeing them right there on the stage, right?
Yeah, I mean, even when you're under a stage and you're looking through a hole like that, which I'm sure we're all quite au fait with these days, where we get thrown in the horriblest positions. But even that, just that small amount where you can see their facial expressions, you can see the way that they stand in, the way that they're moving. All of those give you little ideas of, you know, what's going on and what needs to be changed.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, you get very good at reading body language.
Yeah, it's definitely harder now seeing an artist from the side of the stage than it used to be from I remember. And I've always put it down to video, actually. Because lighting rigs now always want to light artists from the side because there's so much video content. It's just like looking at searchlights. You never, and I haven't seen an artist I've worked for 10 years. You know, you're either underground looking at a TV, or you're completely blinded.
Yeah, using a periscope.
You can't put a speaker or an antenna anywhere on stage, but lighting guys are quite happy to go and stick lights wherever they want, normally pointing straight at your face.
Yeah.
It's always the battle.
Yeah. But the communication's a big thing. And I mean, I think it depends how confident they are and the type of relationship you have with them. You know, I mean, if you know, I hope you're all right, because I couldn't see you. It's always a good icebreaker.
And also, it's about understanding the vocabulary as well. Of when you talk post show, you know, things of. It sounded very green in that song. Also, you know, using words to describe how they're feeling, or the way that certain shows went. It's deciphering what they meant by that. And sometimes it can be the complete opposite of what they think the direction needs to go. But you know that to achieve the goal of what they've explained to you, you need to go in one direction or the other.
Right.
Greg, you have another question for us?
Man, we have so many questions. So
one
that's come up a couple of times, obviously not a Sennheiser related question, but is anybody using Klang for their IEM mixes? This has come up in a couple of questions here, actually.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, actually. It's so Klang is the 3D immersive in-ear technology, which uses binaural hearing, how we hear naturally through a combination of level change, phase, and EQ to determine whether a sound's coming from down low or up high or behind us, and it replicates that to create this 3D imagery through a pair of in-ears, and then you do your Klang mix, and then you just feed that back into your left and right of your in-ear pack, and I love it, actually. It's fantastic. yeah, I can't say enough good things about it.
And the artist is enjoying that immersive sound, and it's not, does perspective stay the same as well, or how does that work with relationship to the positioning of the instruments and so forth? Is it?
Well, you can put things wherever you want, so it feels, the best way I can describe it is it feels as though you're standing on stage and you've taken your in-ears out, but imagine that you could hear all the sounds that we have DI'd, you know, keyboards and what have you, naturally, and everything was at the perfect level. It's like you're just standing on stage and you've taken your in-ears out and you're hearing everything around you. So you have complete control over where you place different sounds, and you can do it by putting things where they actually physically are on stage, or you might choose to place sounds that are less important, say, to the mix out further, and the sounds that are critical up front and center and high, because they're perceived by our brains as they need our attention. So something that you need for timing and pitch, you generally put up center and high, even if the keyboard player's back there and they need piano. So yeah. And
it tracks. So if there's a singer and he's facing the audience, or she's facing the audience, and the keyboard is behind them to the right, and then if they turn this way, it tracks in their headphone feed, their inner feed to behind them now. So
there is a widget that you can add that does that, but it doesn't feel great to me. I think it can feel quite disorientating actually. So I keep things where they are.
Okay, interesting. I wonder, and has anybody else tried it in the group?
I mean, I played with it.
Yeah, I had to play with it early on, but it was still early days.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of my artists are either one in, one out, or they like to pop one out, and as soon as you do that, obviously it's completely useless. So it's been the thing. You've got to have an artist that's really, really committed to it, wearing to it all the time.
Yeah, you've got to put them in and leave them there.
Yeah, I would be now if it wasn't for this lockdown business. My next tour, I got some. It's prime for the Pet Shop Boys.
Perfect for that, yeah.
But I have to admit, I was going to be extremely tentative with it. I wasn't going to leap in. It was going to be, I'll just make the click. I'll give some space for the click, and the audience might be fabulous, and then we'll see where we go from there. That's you know, little small steps.
That's the biggest thing. It brings space. I've found, especially when you've got a lot of elements. I used it on the War of the Worlds, which is this big.
I can imagine, Becky. I can imagine always having room for a click in an ear mix. You can always. That's what excited me about it. I think instead of bleeding click down some, you know, with blood trickling down their necks, you can always go right. That's the click, and I'll just place for it.
Yeah, you
can
the
really handy thing about it is that you can, because you've got all this space suddenly available to you. We found that you can actually reduce the central element of someone's mix by 6 dB. So if you can knock the drummer's click down by 6 dB, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's protecting people's hearing, so it's good.
Yeah.
Down from
I'm looking forward to it.
And at the very least, you could put, I guess, a binaural feed of the stage and the ambience, you know, to give them that immersive feel as well, and just to do more discrete mix of all the close miking stuff. Right, and just give them an ambio feed underneath for ambience.
Yeah, you don't have to put every element into the placement arena, if you like. You can choose which ones you want to use spatially and which ones you just want to leave. Like for example, the non information things that are just for information, like maybe a talk mic or something like that. You don't need to put that in the 3D domain. You can just keep that in the stereo domain and submix your 3D.
Are you using it on an SD7, Beck?
Yeah.
You're using the new integrated, because it's integrated within the channel.
I was about to be. I was about to get on a plane and do that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And were you going to use the new DMI cards, or were you still using the fabric? Were you going to use the new DMI? Yeah, definitely the way to do it.
Yeah, it's the whole immersive side of things. You know, it's happening obviously in music. It's happening in music production for you know, records now and broadcast. You know, I mean, even the last Olympics, all the venues we're going to be Dolby Atmos produced, for immersive playback for people. So you can definitely see, and now here on stage, live on stage.
And it'll happen because the whole thing with in-ears is it's made musicians go from wanting a basic mix they can do a live gig through to actually having a mix that's replicating an album sound. And I think as artists move more towards in-ears, the good side and the bad side is when they're on stage, they actually want to hear a full produced mix, not just when it was all wedges. It's more functionality of you want a vibey gig, but you're not necessarily needing to hear absolutely everything. And the problem with in-ears is it becomes a different experience, and people want to hear the finished, polished result.
And
so
you end up mixing 14 left-right mixes. As opposed to elements, like you said, of around the stage that people can't hear. You're not filling in the gaps anymore. You're actually creating.
You're doing everything from scratch.
Yeah.
Definitely increases the workload.
That's really intriguing. Yeah,
we need to start charging per mix, I think, guys.
It makes it a little more complicated,
nice.
right? Absolutely. A lot more channels now.
Those front of house guys with their left and right.
And now do you start automating things more, right? You start automating different mixes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, automation's it's a huge thing within ears. I mean, it's and with wedges as well. But it's definitely, I mean, the amount of hours I've sat there after the band have left programming the board and like listening back to my playback and then doing time code automation. It's it's a huge amount of time to get ready.
Do you find that when you're running in rehearsals that when the band are in there, you're making small changes, but the big changes you're making is when you play and you play back, hours after they've gone?
75-80% of the mix is done when the band aren't there. It's almost like I want the band to come in, run through the set, and then go. Get on with my gig. You can just loop a section and work on it and tweak, your gates and compressors and just balance the mix for each individual person. Sit there.
It's like being back in the studio.
It's just it's unfortunately.
Greg, you got another question for us?
Always. So
I know I'm looking at them loading up.
we've got a good one here. Is any advice for dealing with an extremely quiet vocalist when the band is loud and everyone is on wedges?
Get a really good vocal coach. No, seriously, if you've got a really quiet singer, a good vocal coach can give you an extra 2 or 3 dB.
Yeah.
Easily.
And that can make the difference, right?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, athletes have coaches. It's always a tricky subject with singers, but I mean, if a top athlete can have a coach, why can't a top singer have a coach as well? It's it's a muscle. If they work it properly, you can get it can help.
And you're always looking at small gains in that. If you do have a quiet singer, you're always looking at small gains. Microphone placements, like we said earlier about creating safe zones where it's slightly deader on stage so that they can. You can get those extra couple of dBs out of it because small gains are a big difference.
Yeah, you're not going to revolutionise it, are you? As you say, it's using baffles and mic placement and just anything you can do to make the area where the vocalist is manageable. And then it's all about gain before feedback. How loud can you get that microphone in the wedges?
And then microphone choices as well for the singer. I mean, like those, just small percentage gains can make all the difference for you.
Different sensitivity of the microphone. If you get it, can get a little bit more sensitivity without creating more feedback.
And the mic that's matched to that singer's tonalities, because again, you're talking about it might only give you half a dB, but that could be the difference between them being comfortable with what they're hearing and struggling to hear themselves.
Right, with the tone of their voice matches what that's going to accentuate. Yeah.
Particularly with a quiet singer, those choices become much more crucial. If you have a foghorn singer, then you can put almost any mic on it and any wedge in it will work. I think when you've got a really quiet singer, you've got to very carefully choose your equipment to make it work for them. And do everything you can to keep the sound down near them. I mean, anything you can do to help them.
Stick to the ballads. Greg, you got another one for us?
Yep.
See if we can get
so it says, when speaking of EQ, any preferences of using a graphic or parametric EQ and why?
In what context? For ears or wedges? Or
so this specifically says wedges for this question.
I'd go graphic just because I'm old school.
Me too.
And it's always nice to have it as a graph.
But parametric's better. I mean, Becky's right. Parametric is a better result, but I think just because of maybe my age and how I've done it.
I mean, quite often I'll put a parametric across, like on a digital system, that you put a parametric, like a general mix across, a general EQ across all your mixes, and then you're individually grabbing, per mix then on a graphic. So it's more of an overall sort of EQ. But again, it's you know, it's down to the individual show as well. Sometimes, like you said, if you can get away with a parametric.
And also, it's just like not over EQing it. You know,
Yeah.
if the wedge isn't,
And
you're not going to make a cheap wedge.
over-EQing.
Yeah, you're not going to make a cheap wedge sound like an expensive wedge, no matter how good an engineer you
Yeah.
are. You know, there's a limit to the physicality with the equipment. If you want a louder wedge, you need a louder wedge. It's ultimately that's where you've got to go. And even if that means, even if you're at a lower level, I mean, even if you tour a centre pair of wedges for your main singer, that can make the difference. If you're going around and doing the club circuit, just having a good pair of wedges for your main vocalist can make the difference in your gig.
Totally.
Even if you're not carrying full production, just take an amp rack and a pair of wedges, if the budget will stretch to it, and at least you have some consistency and you can make sure they're nice and loud. Because we've all been there when you're small touring clubs and you turn up and there's a pile of broken wedges with out of phase horns. And
I think I'd take wedges and a nice reverb over a desk sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
because even I mean, other than the cheapest of desks, most of them now have hit a certain level where you can get a good result.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, graphics or parametrics, I'd say both, quite frankly. You know, nowadays, that's what I said earlier on about having like a full toolkit now. You know what I mean? You haven't got to, you know, I'll just, you know, I'm the same as you, Matt. I'll graphic because of my age. but you know, it's now, you know, buenas noches, as I like to say. You know what I mean? You'd always now you can actually go, actually, I will graphic it, but I'm just going to have a little bit of a dig here.
Yeah.
Because I can, and it's just it's having scalpels as well as sledgehammers, isn't it?
Right.
Even though my gut instinct would say straight away go to a graphic, I'm thinking that every tour I've done, I've used the parametric inside the amp to tune the wedge or the side fill before, and then have the graphic over, as you say, John said, for the grab. So I suppose Seamus is right. You do use both. I mean, it's a
How about on ears? Parametrics? Everybody use parametrics on their output?
Parametrics.
Yeah. I wouldn't use a graphic on ears.
Yeah.
No. But I mean, parametrics. I mean, I do very little EQ on ears, on overall EQ on mixes.
No, I agree.
Don't seem to, you know, it's funny, I can count on one hand the amount of people who've turned around and say, can you make my whole mix do this or that in terms of EQ? Hardly, and that always surprised me, actually. I always thought people have huge opinions about what ears sound like. And you hardly get anybody mention that. Well, I don't anyway. I mean,
I think it depends. I mean, for me, a key thing is always trying to get all the artists on stage on the same type of in-ears, because that's a huge thing. So that way, if everyone's on the same brand, when they're all on different brands, that's when it makes it tricky with in-ears, and sometimes that's when parametric comes in, particularly when you've got different gain structures, because it's, you know, saying three different people with three different systems, which is nuts.
Right. Three different molds and drivers.
I mean, if you can get the budget to get everybody on the same type and yourself, I think that can help hugely. But if not, that's where parametrics can come in to try and balance them up a little bit.
Yeah.
With the in-ears and just we're talking about it, can you control volume going to those in-ears, or when they say louder, how do you manage that so you're not killing these people with volume?
Well, I think half the time when people ask for it louder, they're turning their pack down.
I mean, that's always the bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, someone's asking for more and you go over and they've got their pack on 3. And then you go, well, why don't you turn it up? And they say, well, I don't want it to be too loud. I'll tell you what, you put it on 6 or 7 again and I'll turn it down over there.
Yeah.
There's always a couple of musicians on stage where that seems to be an ongoing battle where it's a constant.
Yeah. And I think that's really important as well. Keeping that continuity between what your pack is on and what their pack on is half of the winning. You know, that's half of the game. Is once you get them to be on the same as what you are, then everybody's on the same hymn sheet and you can just keep going.
Well, it's that whole system gain structure, getting the gain structure right from your input gain all the way through your console to the sensitivity on the packs and the transmission, the wedges, so that everything can run. Because you've only got one gain structure on the desk effectively. I mean, I know with a quantum you can actually do some silly things, but it's one of those things where you've got to try and make sure the gain structure is even throughout. So whether you're, especially when you've got ears and wedges or some different types of in-ears, if you've got your gain structure right, then it makes your mixing a lot easier. If you haven't got your gain structure right, you know, a small incremental change on the desk is changing it a little bit in the in-ears and a large amount in the wedges, and you're going to be into trouble. So it's worth spending time when you set it all up to make sure your gain structure from the input to the output is balanced all the way through.
Yeah.
Greg, what do you got?
How do you protect your artists using in-ear monitors for from unforeseen loud pops and noises.
Right, sort of what we're just talking about. But yeah, how do you protect them then from something happening where it does get a jolt?
I mean, I always put a limiter on the output stage of the desk. I don't use the limiters on the packs because I think they're too severe, too safe. But I protect it all the way up until it leaves my mixing console with a brick wall limiter set on the output stage, so it's not going to get any louder than the level I choose.
Everybody does that pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's just and that's protecting yourself. I think you need
just
to
put a brick wall there and
I mean, it's a shame. I wish the packs had a little bit more adjustability on the limiters on the packs, but they all seem to be at a fixed level, which I suppose is a legal requirement, but sometimes they're a little bit too severe.
Yeah.
Squashes it too much, you can start to hear the difference.
Yeah.
Okay, Greg, what else you got?
All right, so there's actually a question here about latency. So this one's specific to the Klang system that you guys were talking about, but I guess we can elaborate a little bit on it. It's like, how do you guys deal with latency? You know, if you're using digital consoles, I mean, everything is adding latency to the system. And at what point do you kind of say, okay, it's too much, or it's, you know, giving an issue?
I mean, the Klang, just pertaining to the Klang system, it's tiny now. I think we're down to, I forget the actual number, but it might be 0.21 milliseconds. So it's
Oh,
tiny.
wow. Okay. Right. But you still have to look at, you know, whether you're using digital microphones and the processing you're doing, right? And still the cumulative
you have
delay.
I mean, I always work out the whole system latency of the system. We did a test a few years back actually with a drummer on Madonna, Steve Sedolnik, and we got him to play. And as he had an electronic drum kit, and we started adding latency in to what he was listening to see at which point it was unacceptable to him playing. And it was really interesting because around 3 or 4 milliseconds, he actually thought it sounded better, which makes sense because most musicians, when they play, are used to a certain element of latency if you're 5 feet, 6 feet away from your guitar case.
Yeah, physical latency.
And as we started going up, we got to sort of 6, 7 milliseconds, and he was fine then. 8 or 9, he wasn't happy, and by the time we hit 10 milliseconds, he kind of threw down the drumsticks and went, "That's me." Now, obviously, with a singer, it's more crucial because they've got the bone connection.
Yeah,
so you have to have it even less for a singer. But I think, as long as you're under 4 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, I don't think anyone's overly going to complain. You might get some really sensitive, but I think you've got a little bit of leeway there. I think it's the plug-in chain you have to be careful with.
So what's the consensus in terms of latency? Well, I guess it depends on the artist, but
it depends on the artist.
Yeah,
right.
But I'd say 4 or 5, and then some people will freak out with less, but I guess
if you can't get away with it, what are some of the tricks to sort of hide it?
Well, I think for singers and things, you can't really hide it because they hear their own voice. I mean, drummers and things.
Drummers especially too, right?
I mean, there's a physical contact. The same within ears because it's there at 0 time.
Right.
You know, they're feeling it. They're playing it at 0 time. It's. I don't think there's any way of really getting away from it than reducing it by getting rid of your 12 plugins or your, you know, whatever people have of them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you got
it. You've got to be very conscious of it. I mean, now we've got digital microphones, digital in-ear systems are starting to come out. Consoles are all digital. So, you know, even as a bass, you're talking about nearly 3 milliseconds sometimes before you put any plugins on or anything else. So you have to be very careful on what you stick in the vocal chain.
Yeah,
with digital in-ears, right? Because we already have a lot of digital mics. So now if we have the digital in-ears, it's going to add, you know.
Yeah, that's another millisecond on the output.
Before you know it, you know, you add up each individual element by the time you're going in and out of the board for some analog piece and things like that. You know, before you know it, you're up there. You can really feel it.
I always heard that, and I've heard some engineers say that they'll try to sneak in some reverb or a little delay to sort of kind of hide it. Is that can that really work?
It can. I think if you have a singer who has a lot of vocal effects, you can get away with more latency than someone who wants it bone dry. It definitely hides it a little bit, but it's also on the nature of that singer. If they like a big reverby sound, then you can get away with it. If you want someone who's much more clinical with what they're listening to,
not going to work.
Harder to sneak it away.
All right, Greg, what else you got?
So on that point of reverb, it says, how are you dealing when requested with reverb or effects in either in-ears or wedges?
I think when it comes to ears, reverb is your friend in a lot of ways, because that's
Right.
how you create in that space and that element of not having the ears in. That you know, especially for vocals and things, it can be a massive game changer for choosing the right reverbs on the right instruments. And again, like we were saying with doing stuff in rehearsals, I think probably of that after hours stuff, once the band go home, you know, doing choosing the correct reverbs and playing with reverbs is probably a good 25% of that time once the band are away. For myself.
Yeah, I've always called reverb vocal glue. You've got to have reverb with the vocal, otherwise it's just a bit ridiculous, isn't it? It's sort of, you've got to have some sort of tail, haven't you?
I've never used it with wedges though. I've always
neither
with wedges, because you got the room reverb. I think that's the thing within ears. You're trying to replicate that. You've lost the room reverb, so you need to, as a minimum, you've got to add in that room reverb.
Yeah, see, I've used it a little bit when you've got somebody that's one in, one out, to try and get at least a similar type of sound to what's in your ear, to what's coming out of the wedge. Just little bits, not, you know, obviously not killing it.
Right.
But it just smooths that transition of the audio from the wedge to the in-ear.
And it also does. I know Andrea Bocelli, the opera singer, he just has reverb in his wedges and nothing else. He doesn't have any direct signal.
Yeah.
So
really?
He sings operatic, so it's just he sings, but he has a couple of Mayo wedges which literally just have the reverb coming back for him.
That's interesting.
I think it's quite an operatic thing, isn't it? I was with Il Divo for a while, and they loved it swimming, and a couple of them liked it absolutely swimming coming out the side fills.
Who's that, Becky? Who liked it?
Il Divo.
Yeah. Again, operatic, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's amazing between different artists. You get some artists who want it literally swimming in reverb. Graham Faith's like that. She wants it almost underwater. And then you get other artists who they say they don't want any reverb, but as John said, you still have to give them some, because you've got to replicate that natural sound. So that you have the natural reverbs that don't sound like reverb, but they are reverb, and then you have the kind of affected reverb, which is.
I always like that moment in a sound check where somebody speaks into a mic and they go, "Is there reverb on that?" And you go, "Yeah, just a little bit." And they go, "I'll turn it off." You turn it off, and then when the band starts, they're like, "Why does it all sound weird?" Like, bang, in it goes again.
Yeah.
I think I dropped out a little bit earlier, did I?
You went away for a minute.
I went away. Sorry for that. I was talking. I was like, "Wait a minute, what happened here?" Apologize for that. Greg, how are we looking there?
Good. Here's another question. Is it a must-have to use stereo mixes, or can I just send mono? I like sending stereo mixes, but when I use a small console, they don't have a lot of auxes.
I think it depends on the situation you're in. If you don't have the outputs, then you got to do what you got to do. You know, like my guys have the option, two of them, to have nice open stereo mixes, and they don't really care. They're mono, whatever. They're in, they're out. So
as long as they got something.
Yeah, but then, you know, we went a couple of years ago. They did a Temple of the Dog reunion, and we had Chris Cornell's with us. We had two monitor people because he used stereo ears and wanted it mixed like the album. That was too much for one person. So I had one person dedicated to him that mixed his ears and did whatever he needed, and I took care of the guys. So it just depends on the situation.
And
it depends on the artist and what they expect, you know.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask, was when they do want to have a mix like the album, what do you do? So you had to get another person to do it.
Yeah, there was just too much. Too much stuff going on.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of, and I'm sure we've all done shows where you do that with multiple engineers at monitors. I mean, on Pink I look after her, and then someone else looks after the band. Right. When Axel came to sing with AC/DC, it was the same thing. He brought, and a lot of the time it's to do with relationships as well. You know, especially if you have somebody coming into a new, to sing with a band that's been existing. But it's you need a really good working relationship with that second monitor engineer. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but
especially when you're on a loop sharing the gain. And it's
especially when you're in a loop sharing the game.
yeah.
but they like to have that, you know, I think they like that too. They know they get that one person that's mixing them, right? And,
Yeah.
and they're concentrating
Especially
on
for-
them.
yeah.
You know,
Especially
I know
for
they're taking
singers. I
care
mean, a
of me.
guitarist has got a guitar tech, a drummer's got a drum tech.
Yeah.
For a
Right.
singer to have their own tech, being the monitor person,
Right.
I think it's you know, it's good for a safety comfort blanket.
Yeah.
You two have almost got more monitor engineers than they have band members at the moment.
Band members,
Yeah.
aren't they? Yeah, they got one each, haven't they?
Exactly.
Yeah, almost. It's three guys, isn't it? But I mean, yeah, the thing is, the artist is comfortable and they've got the money to pay for someone specifically
Yeah.
for them. That's great. But I think
Keeps
you
us
know,
all working.
But back to the mono or stereo thing, I think, you know, it depends what you've got, isn't it? If you're in a club and you haven't got enough outputs, you've got to do it in mono. There's no way. I think if you have someone with both ears in and you can do stereo, that's probably a good thing to start with.
Yeah.
But if you can't and the gear's not there, then you make it work in mono. I suppose you have to be careful of how you combine sounds to make sure you don't get stuff phasing and cancelling out.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's very easy to overdo a mono ear mix, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when
it
you've got stereo track strings and things, you've got to make sure
Yeah.
they can be combined into mono, or maybe just take one side of it, depending on
Yeah.
how well the job's
Yeah.
been done in the studio.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right, Greg, what else you got there?
All right, so I've actually got two questions that are kind of related here. So first question is, do you guys usually ask production to have somebody deal with RF coordination when doing wireless IEMs? And do you ever use wired in-ears to try to reduce your RF planning complexity?
Yeah, that's a good,
Yeah,
good,
yes
good
and
question.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes and yes.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it depends on the RF channel count, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
on Roger Waters, I did the RF on it. It was about 45 channels of RF, so that was a lot, but manageable. The last Madonna tour was 106 channels of RF, which, you know, I wasn't going to do that and try and mix monitors. So
Right.
we brought in Ali Biles to do the RF on it. So I think depends on the number of channels, but I think we were talking about EQing wedges earlier on, but for a lot of monitor guys nowadays, I think doing the RF has replaced the EQing of wedges.
Yeah.
And I don't really spend a lot of time EQing wedges. I do spend a lot of time doing the scan and working out the RF plot.
Right.
And most of the gigs
Yeah.
I do, I look after the RF myself.
Is that for everybody? Are all of you pretty much doing the RF now as well,
Right. Yeah.
for the most
Yeah,
part?
although I don't think I'd want to do 45, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I always say double figures is fine.
I think
Yeah.
without
Yes.
getting into a Sennheiser plug with the new digital stuff, it's quite easy to do 45.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you for that.
But I wouldn't want to do it in analog. Definitely not.
No.
Yeah, they're totally different. Yeah, and that's another thing that I mean, you don't go to school to learn about wrangling RF and doing frequency coordination. It's something you guys had to learn as your job progressed through the
Yeah.
years, just like the digital boards, right? You didn't
Yeah.
go back to
But we
school to
were
learn about
lucky.
digital boards.
Yeah, but we were lucky because we saw it coming through. So when the RF first started coming onto gigs, there was a radio mic with 1 or 2 channels, and
Yeah.
so then the first time I had RF on a gig, I think it was the 2 or 3 channels. So we've
Right.
all seen it grow from 2 or 3 channels now up to, I'd say the last show I did was over 100 channels, which was nuts. But we've seen it progress, so we've learned along. I think it's
We're
harder
able
for
to-
people coming
yeah.
into the industry now because they're walking into an environment where their first gig might have 25 channels of RF on it straight away.
Sure.
And in
Yeah.
school they didn't learn about that. They didn't. There's no class that you take when you're learning about mixing and
Definitely
audio
not.
technology.
And the thing is, it changes so quickly as well. I mean, from a from a worldwide aspect, you need to be constantly in school learning because
Right.
the limitations and legalities of it around the world are changing so quickly that
Yeah.
I mean, you almost need a designated person just to keep on top of that aspect. I'm sure everybody else has been the same. That you've started a world tour, and the gear that you take out of the shop is legal everywhere, and by the time you finished it, it's illegal in half the territories you've played.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So that's more of a job, of a separate job now, also on a
Very much so,
larger,
Oh,
Yeah.
larger
totally.
scale, right?
Yeah,
There's
no,
a practical
totally.
aspect as well. If you've got a big RF channel count of just, if you've got hundreds of packs, wrangling all of those and getting them distributed before the show and getting them back again and stopping
Yeah.
somebody going on the bus with them
Right.
on, and so just pairs of hands is useful. So if you have the luxury of an extra RF person, if you've got a big
always.
count, it's a good thing.
And also, I think as well, there's a certain amount of pack your parachute. You know what I mean? It's all very well if you're mixing monitors, and you're also doing RF, and there's some hideous issue with the RF, what do? Well, you have to fix the RF, don't you? But you know what I mean. It's you kind of need somebody there to do that sort of stuff. I always think, really, it's all very well setting it all up, but if it goes tits up, then the whole production will wish there was an RF guy.
Right.
Yeah,
And
it's fine until it's not.
I think especially if you have a lot of changes in costume and sets, and now you want the silver mic, now you need the red mic, and so you're keeping up with that and the handoffs as well.
I mean, we like on Pink and on Share the costume changes and things, as well as on Pink harnesses, attaching to harnesses and fly-in systems and things like that. There is a designated person who follows her for information back to me, and then also, for any of those RF issues, changing out microphones, changing out, pop shields or anything like that. But I think you definitely need that on those type of shows.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We do the same on Madonna. In fact, we have a very good front of house guy who actually, that's his job, is to be her tech. And Dee actually hangs with her and does her mic changes, packs, anything to do with her, he deals with, because you need that. And also the close interaction. So if there's a problem with a quick change, it's someone she knows that ultimately can trust you can go in and fix the problem. And you can't just send in any old roadie into, go fix
that one point of contact as well, which is important, I think. Right. In those shows where there's so much happening and quick changes, etc., I think it's important to have that one point of contact.
It is also the scariest thing about those shows, where your whole show is dependent on that one connection between the in-ears and the pack. Yeah. And the whole gig can go wrong if that comes out or goes wrong. Yeah, it's crucial. That's correct. So
they're way out on the ramp, and they're way out on the ramp somewhere.
Or up in the roof on a fly rig or something. Or there's all sorts of places where it can go wrong, where you just, I've sat there in shows before and looked out and gone, you just suddenly have this horrible thought: if something goes wrong now, what are you going to do? It's especially on a Grammys or billboards, or Super Bowl or something.
Super Bowl,
exactly.
Harry, is Pearl Jam using a lot of wireless systems in there? So a lot of
I wouldn't say a lot.
Hardwired. Yeah.
Vocal mic's hardwire. That's never going to change.
Right. Yeah. It's just used to working that way.
We have the normal. All the techs have ear mixes. 5 of the band guys have ear mixes. There's an ear mix for Ed if he needed it for some reason. So I mean, there's enough wireless that yes, it would be great if we had an RF tech, but it doesn't really warrant it. So I usually handle it. We have a large monitor system, so we have 4 people on the monitor crew, with myself included. So I take that off of them. And then, my techs versed in RF, we have 10 sound people out with us. So there's always someone that's more experienced RF than I am. I know exactly enough to do my gig and not fuck it up. And how to, fix it if I need to.
Right.
And then my tech knows, we rarely have problems. So, I mean, knock on wood. But if something were to go wrong during the show, Brett could pick it up for me.
Right.
But yeah, it would be, we would love someone to be doing RF, because, it's not a fun thing to do. It's not like this is the part of the day I love the most.
Said nobody ever.
As you're like, can I please get some clean frequencies, depending on where we are.
Yeah, I'm the exception. I love, I work for Sennheiser, but I love dealing with frequencies and doing frequencies.
But it's a dark art, though. It's one of those, because you can do everything correct and it doesn't work, and so you still got to check. You can use all the software, do all the scans, and then you listen to a frequency and go, well, that's rubbish. That's not going to work.
Right.
So,
every time, there's always something new to learn.
And we've all walked into, festivals or shows that there is a dedicated RF team, and they'll give me my frequencies, and I'm like, well, these are all bad. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, they are. Well, it said on this, well, I can't use them. So, my best advice is if you have to do RF, try to make sure someone else on your crew has more RF knowledge than you, so that when you get stuck, you have someone to go to.
Yeah.
And then if that's not possible, have 2-3 RF gurus on speed dial if you get stuck into something, so that you can call them and go, what is going on today?
Right.
But you should have those gurus in your phone anyway, of like, you know, to be able to call when you're hitting your head against the wall because Singer has asked for something that you're like, this is unbelievable. You have someone else to call, you know.
And I think wargaming RF is really important as well. So, you know, when you set it all up, do go through each frequency one at a time, turn it off, see what the receiver or the transmit's doing, and walk all the packs. You can't just use the software like Wireless Workbench or IIS and go, well, that's it, it's good. Program it and leave it. You've got to go through it and walk it and check it and turn it off, turn it back on.
Yeah.
It's kind of the one reason I still, you know, I could pass the RF off to someone and say, I'm not doing this anymore. But if it's going to mess up, I want it to be on me.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and you know your artist is going to turn around to you when the RF doesn't work and say,
exactly,
this pack's bad. So I think as a monitor engineer, you have to understand the RF to the point where you can be on
you
top
know
of
how
it.
to you know how to test it, and you know what the limitations of it are, right?
Yeah.
So that here's my space. I need to know where I can and can't go, and making sure it's work.
I think it's peace of mind as well. You know, you take the pack and you walk the stage.
Yeah.
Always
and
walk.
then you
pre-show.
right, okay, right, fine, it's fine. Or I can't improve it, and it might be a bit flaky behind that bit of set.
Right.
But you know that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's peace of mind, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Greg.
But I do hate those situations though, where you know, they walk over and, oh, did you hear that? And you go, what? Well, when I was stood over there on one leg, it did
behind
this.
that video wall.
Behind that video wall.
In the dressing room, down the corridor.
Yeah.
How come it's not working here?
Right.
Yeah.
Where are you? I'm in the bathroom.
Wispy.
How come it's not working here?
Always design a multi-zone system.
Yeah. Well, and also it's the overuse of the word static.
Yes.
Oh, no, yeah. What was it they really
hits.
heard? You're right. What did they really hear? Was it a hit?
Yeah.
Was it
Oh,
static?
it's very staticky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be anything. What was that?
All right, so here's another a little bit of can of worm questions. What is your relationship with compression, and any tips on how or when to use it?
I'm a big fan of bus compression. I quite like a little subtle bus compression on my output mix. 2-to-1 ratio. Yeah, nothing drastic. I think that's quite a good glue. It also depends on the compressor. You know, you put like an SSL-G bus or something over a mix that can catch any little transient. So I'm quite a fan of that. But yeah, it depends on, again, it's like Seamus was saying, the toolkit for what you're trying to achieve. So you don't want to over compress everything, but certain instruments do need it. But less is always more. I think start with less and you know, gradually bring it into your mix.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let it be your friend. Don't let it dominate.
Yeah. Yeah. Just little bits. I think little bits on lots of little things.
Yeah.
Just
I think also
to smooth things out.
With any insert, it's good to bypass it and make sure your mix still works without it. So, you know, if your plugin rack takes a dump, you can bypass all your plugins, and you should still have a good solid mix even without any extra stuff. I think, you know, if you're relying on your plugins too much, you're digging a hole for yourself. Yeah. Particularly when your software crashes and you lose them all.
Yeah. And it can tidy up your mix a lot as well, especially if you've got players who, you know, dig in a little bit too much and, you know, in certain aspects and things. Just those little tiny bits on individual channels can really pull your mix together.
Yeah. But it's little and often, I think, isn't it? Not huge. Yeah. Huge
and also the other thing is, I think it's very easy to scare an artist with compression because they don't know how much noise they're making, which is the worst thing for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
They need to know how much noise they're making all the time, and you can really mask that with compression. So, you know, with the possible exception of the horn section, you know, I'd be like Matt says, little and often.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I quite enjoy. I was using the Quantum on my last tour, and being able to use a little bit of compression on the person who's playing it, but have different compression for everyone else.
Yeah.
Although it was pretty complex and you had to think about what you were doing, that was quite nice where you could.
Or also the flip side as well. Use compression on everybody else, not on the player, so they play in their own dynamic. So that, so they control it, but everybody else is protected a little bit from it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than somebody playing in a world of compression, and everybody else
they don't realise.
Yeah. And you've got levels going up and down like you wouldn't believe. Yeah.
And you were saying earlier too, when you're creating those pockets of space with the floor wedges and monitors, not to over compress them, to keep everything down.
Yeah. You bring in you're squishing it, and then by the time it opens up, you're opening up to a whole world of feedback problems.
Yeah, it makes it unpredictable, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We got about 14 minutes left here, so let's go through some more questions from the audience. And these have been great questions, everybody. Thank you so much for sending these in. Really appreciate it. Greg, what else do you have from the field there?
I've got one here. Is there a certain decibel level you guys try to keep the stage under?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Well, I think we could all go probably round and say about the stages that we have to deal with. I mean, I'm sure yours, Karrie, is loud as well. It's like the AC/DC one is 127 dB on stage.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's crazy levels. Yeah.
I think you have to deal with the stage that you were given. Like when a couple of years ago, because we do this every 5 years. What can we do to reduce the stage volume? Well, the first problem that we have is our drummer. That's how loud our stage is going to be, because Matt plays loud.
Yeah.
And then everybody fills in around him. So you have to deal with what you're given. I do, when we start a tour and when we're in rehearsals, we'll go through everybody's position at different positions and, meter them so that we have a reference of how loud our stage is and if we're staying consistent throughout the tour. Yeah. So
do you find that it creeps up?
Yeah, because it's always going to creep up, and that you're going to hit the 6-month mark of like, why is it so loud up here? You can go and meter it and go, well, we're exactly the same we've always been, or no, we're a lot louder. So everybody, let's take a step back.
You do start with that reference then.
Always a reference.
Almost as a way you can show them, look, this is what we were at.
Yeah. Well, what we'd find with AC/DC is that it would get to end of like a 5-week run, and you'd be like going, it's loud, but how loud is it? You'd meter it, and then you come back after a 3-week break, and you'd be going, whoa, that's so loud, but it's the same as what you had left it. It was just a matter that your ears had recovered over that period of time, and then you'd find that you'd bring it down to your starting point, and then it would again encroach up as it would get to it. It's
I think I was going to say smaller venues as well. It's that liaison with front of house as well, isn't it? To make sure, particularly in smaller gigs, that front of house have got it very scrapingly loud. You've got to have it loud on stage so they can hear it from the wedges. I think it's particularly in smaller venues, it's a teamwork thing between front of house and monitors to make sure they're not killing it.
Yeah, because that'll drive it too. They're just screaming.
And vice versa. If you're too loud on stage, the front of house guy's going to have to push it up to match the stage level. So it is that having an honest, sensible conversation when it gets too loud and going, everybody, as Karrie was saying, you all need to sit down with the band and say, what can we do to help?
You got to have the good relationship with the artist, but you also have to have the good relationship with the front of house and make sure that communication is flowing.
Oh, totally.
And make sure.
And you've got to be, you trust each other in respect that during the show you can ring up and say, the low end is killing me, or I'm hearing this coming back off the side hang or something like that, and that person will make a change. And likewise, if they come back to you, saying the guitar is killing them from the side fill, that you will make a change that will affect them in a positive way.
Yeah, right.
It's also quite interesting, of course, if you're all on ears as well, you hear little squeaks that they don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you went, well, I heard that. And he goes, what?
But that's the best thing about going to in-ears, isn't it? You know, it's like suddenly you don't have to deal with feedback anymore, and it's only in the domain of the front of house guy now.
So it's really obvious when you hear it. It's like,
And you go, it's not me. It's not me.
I've had front of house guys call me up on the comms and say there's too much low end coming off the stage until I pointed out I've got no speakers at all. So it's kind of
Yeah, what are you talking about?
It's old habits die hard of ringing the intercom.
Or blaming the monitor engineer.
Yeah, first point of call.
Whose feedback was that?
Yeah.
What else you got there, Gregory?
All right, so there's another one. It says, how do you guys handle redundancy in case of crashes? Do you double everything, or do you just try to get the most important stuff?
I know on Madonna we duplicate everything. Absolutely everything is duplicated. Every cable, every system, every network has got 2 of them. Even to the point where when we first started joining the SD7s, we had 3 SD7s on the loop with front of house monitors and a sort of backup, generic backup in there. We don't do that anymore because the engines have obviously got redundancy in. But, all the local computers, everything, playback, my plugins. But that's an extreme gig where it not working is not an option. Other gigs I work on, it depends on the artist. Again, if they're more willing to, you know, Michael Bublé was great. If something went wrong, he'd stop and talk to the crowd. So you didn't have to be so concerned about redundancy in that way. But other artists do not want it to stop. So in that case, I back everything up and make sure it's all fully redundant.
I think redundant as much as possible.
Be redundant on the most important things. So when Ed was on ears, he definitely had backup to be able to switch instantly. He uses an RF mic occasionally to do when we play to the back of the house or we're doing stadium shows. There's 2 of those in case one if for something's not working. It's got backup vocal mic, right?
Run out and swap it up.
We have everybody else is kind of, you know, they have duplicate packs that I can just hand them a different pack with their mix on it because that's probably what's going to go down. You know, figure out what goes down. Is it the ears? Is it the mic cable? Is it the pack? Right. For us, it's going to be the pack. And then after that, you know, we have 2 SD5s on stage, one for me and the band, and then the other one does all the tech mixes and any other weird stuff. If we had a support band, I think we were going to have a support band this year. I'm not sure. They would be on that, and then my files on there every day in case my Surface went down. We could get that console up and running, and I think, you know, the last time we ran through it in less than 3 minutes. And then if something were to happen to front of house mixes on there and can switch over.
I think it's important as well to have the protocol so that when you do have a redundant system that you practice you know, that changeover, even if it's with the artist with a change of pack or a change of ears, that they know where to come, who's going to do it, you know, that you're going to pull like the old set out to the new set goes in, things like that, that you rehearse these things as well while in rehearsals. It's all part of the show.
We have a step-by-step on the, you know, I have like a, I don't know, a clipboard stand for set list, right? And taped to that is, so you rip the set list off and it tells you step by step of how we're going to switch consoles. Because we were like, when we're panicking, we'll be like, what do we do now? And now, you know, someone's got that. Do this, do that. This is, you know.
It's second nature. It becomes muscle recall then when you are, you know, swapping multis over or something like that onto a spare board or ears out or anything like that, that you rehearse it, you know, not with the artist maybe, but as a team, so that you know that you're, you know, you're like an F1 pit crew, that you know what everybody's doing at that point.
And there's a certain, when something does happen like that, there's a certain satisfaction of how well it's handled. I always think, you know, when you get that little thing, you go, oh God, and then there's the great, you know, meeting in the autopsy arms afterwards, and I remember several times going, well, this can't happen, you know, this can't happen again, this can't happen again, and I'm chuffed because I think that was brilliant, you know what I mean? I mean, that happened, and that happened, and that was great. you know.
The fact that I've carried this around the world for 18 months, this one
And
day
now
it
justified the
worked,
budget.
and I am justified for bringing it.
Right. I needed it. Yay. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I told you we might need it one day.
There is always that horrible millisecond when something goes wrong and you go, "Oh crap! Now's the time we need to use it."
Yeah.
Where
is
your
it?
brain kicks into action? Yeah,
It's not still on the track, is it?
That can really
Towards the end
gel.
of
That
it
can
all when
really
people are
gel
getting
the whole
lazy.
team too. That can really
Oh,
gel
yeah,
everybody together. You know.
Yeah. You know, a win for the team is a massive morale boost.
And also, you know, sort of redundancy on boards as well. You know, spare channels here, spare channels there, alternate inputs. You know, all of those little things.
Oh, just components to the console as well.
Yeah. Well,
definitely.
just you build that in when you build the session. You know,
Yeah.
right. What am I going to do if I lose one of those? Okay, I'll do this and I'll do that, and there'll be a channel waiting. Look, you know, they'll be sitting there for months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite often I'll put like a spare DI up in amongst the backline on a long cable, so that if the bass rate goes down or if the acoustic guitar, at least we can get something out of it. You know, especially with the DI.
I always have a spare mono and a spare stereo channel as well, because if one leg of the keyboard goes, if you've got a stereo set and a mono cable, it's easy to change. But it's a lot easier to change to a spare than it is to try and fix a problem during the show.
Yeah, 100%.
You can't really troubleshoot during the show. You just need to go, that's broken, go to this,
change everything, and then we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, in the past, I've always in the line system, I'll have a spare stage left and a spare stage right line that's just sit there.
Yeah.
And everything on stage left gets the alternate input from that one, and everything on stage right gets the alternate input from that one. So there's your spare lines ready to go.
Yeah.
You know, packing your parachute.
Yep.
Yeah.
Becky, you got one more for us?
I do. So this one's actually specific to the in-ear monitors themselves. What do you guys think about some of these in-ears that have multiple drivers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 20 drivers, or single driver in-ears? And what do you guys find important in that aspect?
I think it's important to know your artist and what they're looking for. Currently on my stage, there's 3 different brands of in-ear companies. Yes, I would like them to all use the same company, but it doesn't work. What works for one doesn't work for all of them. So I've accepted that. And I stay on top of what in-ear technology there is available. And if it's something, right now everybody's happy with the brands they're using, so there's no reason to change. If something's there that I think would make them happy, I would suggest it to them. So my thing is always pick the right tool for your job.
Very much so.
You can have brand loyalty is great, but sometimes know what your options are and use it.
I agree.
Yeah.
What do you guys?
I mean, I ask people like the people I'm looking at, actually.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, have a ring round.
Well, that's a good point.
I mean,
ask around. See what
have
people
a
like.
ring round going, I was thinking about getting some of these. What do we think about that? I mean, multiple driver ears now, I mean, they do sound extremely good, I always think. And a lot of people talk about, the timing of the drivers in the ears. I've never really noticed anything particular. I mean, some people swear by a single driver, but I've never really.
When you're using one in, one out, and a load of wedges, it does make a slight difference if you've got that because it's one point source from the wedge and from the ear. It makes a bit of a difference in that respect. I found, and also if you've got multiple drivers, it's so crystal clear, and there's a big thick low end and this beautiful crisp high end. When you've got a wedge in front of you as well, the disparity between the ear and the thing is too much. So then a single will work. But
that makes sense.
If you've got 2 in, like Matt was saying earlier, with the low end and the pseudo low end of multiple driver ears, I think it's a good way to go down, definitely.
And headphones are such a personal experience for everybody, right? They have different perceptions. I'll put the same headphone on 5 different people and they'll all hear it differently.
Yeah.
Everybody's
and then you sing. you know, and
Yeah.
getting that, you know, all the bone contact and that.
Right. How's that feeling as it comes?
Yeah, then that is very individual to the singer.
Yeah. I think also what about the tiring element? Because there is a definite fatigue thing with multiple drive that does kick in. I think it's kind of mainly in rehearsals when you're in there for ages.
Yeah, I think over a 2-hour show period or a 3-hour show period, I think you're okay. But when you're doing, like you said, rehearsals of 10-hour days or 20-hour days like Matt.
Say 10-hour days. You guys are lucky. 10-hour days. That's the day off, isn't it? That's the Sunday when you come in.
That's the Sunday when you just got in to catch up. Yeah.
Do you guys have any advice for with everybody that's online now? For you all got all different stories of how you got into the business. Any advice for someone that wants to progress up the ladder and where they might be able to start or take advantage of situations?
I think always. Go on. Sorry, Karrie.
I was just going to say yes, have a great attitude, and don't stop learning.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's
always watch and learn. Never
Always
think that you
watch
know
and
everything, because somebody will always be able to show you a better way or, a better sounding way or an easier way or a way to do it on a board. Always learn. Every day is a school day.
Absolutely. And that's one of the best things about it, actually.
Yeah.
The curiosity never wanes. You're always going,
Having that passion, always want to learn the next new thing.
Yeah.
Be useful. Be someone that
useful.
People like to have around. That's got a.
That's a key point, isn't it?
Say good attitude, and if you've finished your gig, can you help anybody else? Just be a good team player.
I think at our end of the multi-core, that thing of, we've all worked with some of the best engineers in the world, but if they're not a nice person to hang out with and get on with, they're not around that long.
Right?
Sorry about that, John.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. Mention it.
It's true, and honestly, this is a small industry. Everybody knows everybody. So if you do have a reputation of knowing your job and being nice about it and being able to work with people, that goes a long way, for you to get jobs and learn and to be known. Everybody.
Yeah, it's still very much a word of mouth industry. When people are looking for an engineer, they do ask around. So
Right.
And for advice and things. I mean, we all speak quite frequently. Me and Matt are often ring each other up about various different issues we're having or things like that. And you're very much a community that everybody should be able to reach out to each other when they need them for technical or any other aspects.
Yeah. People want to keep nice people around them that can do the job. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're about done. And I just want to thank all of you, John, Becky, Matt, Seamus, and Karrie, and for being here and taking the time to share your knowledge. I thought it was incredible. We hit a lot of different topics, and your insight is just invaluable. And now is such a great time to share all of your insight, right? Because people a lot of people are stuck at home still. It's going to change. We know it's going to get better eventually. But what a great time to learn from you guys and see how you've done things over the years and how you can tell how you all work together, even and how you all communicate now. It's just fantastic to sit here and watch and listen to you guys. So I really do appreciate it very much for being here, guys.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for putting it together, David.
Yeah, thank you for having
thank
us.
you very much, David.
Our pleasure. And
Thanks,
thank you, Greg.
for the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for
Thank you for having me.
the question wrangling. I appreciate that. And thanks
We got
everybody.
over 70 questions.
Did you? Oh, I'm so sorry we couldn't get to everybody, but I hope this has been really informative for everyone, and we really appreciate everybody taking the time with us to talk about monitor mixing. So I'm gonna do they'll yell at me if I don't do this. So I got to do a poll, and to launch to everybody. We're always looking for feedback. And are you guys getting the poll too? Are you getting it?
Yeah.
So you can
we
decide
vote?
if it was great.
Yeah. Who are we going to vote out of the house this week?
So yeah, just feedback is always great in case there's a topic you guys like to see in the future or anything from this that we can cover if we do another monitoring mixing seminar in the future. So we're always open to suggestions. And so I appreciate anybody that wants to jump on there and give us a little bit of feedback. And yeah, I'll just leave that open for a while. And thanks again to everybody. I'll close the session out in just a couple of minutes after everybody's had a chance to go through and see how great we were. And thank you, Becky, for getting up so early.
Yeah, thanks, Becky.
My pleasure. It was fun.
Now you can have breakfast. And we'll see how live sound happens in the future, guys, with COVID-19, right? And
Yeah.
just for people online, we talked a little bit about that, and hopefully we'll see shows sooner than later. And I'm sure it'll be in a different way, but there are people working on how to figure this out. So I'm sure we'll all see each other on the road again sometime
It'll
soon.
happen.
Yes,
People are too desperate for concerts. It's going to happen.
Yep,
It's,
absolutely.
just figuring out how to do it.
Absolutely, I agree. All right. All right, Greg, you all set?
Yes, sir.
And I got everybody did their thing, so I'm going to end the polling. Love technology. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it very much. Stay safe out there. And if you guys need anything from me or Greg, you know how to reach me. And maybe we'll do this again in the future if you guys will all.
Yeah,
why not?
That was really
Yeah,
good.
Good fun.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
great.
Great to see
Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Stay safe out there.
All right, thanks.
Take
See you,
care.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Cheers.
Bye.